Twoje miejsce docelowe jest właśnie tutaj. Typowy kierowca autobusu. Jesteś na miejscu. Zapraszam do oglądania. Jarosław Juszkiewicz.
Dzień dobry. Poniedziałek, 16 września. Ja nie mogę, już połowa września. I nie wiem, czy nie będzie padać, a jeżdżenie po plażach i jeszcze jak pada, sprzątanie niefajne.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to go through the plan with you today so you know what's happening, just in case you have forgotten. So, as Dale's obviously mentioned, the first stop is going to be the American Cemetery. Once we're there, I am going to get off the coach and run ahead. I've got something that I need to quickly sort out. While that's happening, Dale is going to take all of you off of the coach and over to the restroom facilities. There is a large restroom facility here, but it is outside the cemetery. So my request to you is the go try for result situation, as then we can head into the cemetery and not have to worry about anyone immediately having to come back. Okay, so Dale will take you over to that. You do what you need to do and I will meet you there, and then together we will walk into the cemetery. This one is not like the German cemetery where you're at the side of the road and you can see all the crosses. You do have to walk into this large establishment, shall we say. There are reflection pools here, there is a large memorial, there is the wall of the missing. It is much grander in scale and impactful, I would say, compared to what you've seen, and this is one of the comparisons that we're going to look at. So there's a couple of things that we want to talk to you about. As Dale and I said, we don't like guiding in cemeteries. That is a personal choice, I won't lie. There may be guides guiding, but my argument to this is, if you are going to a grave, then you are all gathered on other men's graves, and some people are leaning against other men's graves, or even sitting in some cases, as I've seen, on other people's stones. I just think that's a bit wrong, if I'm honest. You know, everyone is in that cemetery for the same reason, so that's my personal reason why I don't like guiding. But if there is, if it's roped off, we can't go amongst the stones anyway, in which case we'll take you down the pathways and talk to you about men that are in certain sectors of the cemetery, so at least that way you do get their stories. Once we've had time in the cemetery, and I'm not going to rush you, you know, this is probably one of the most meaningful days that you will have on this tour at least, and then I'll give you a chance to go and reflect at your own pace in your own way. After we do what we need to do in the cemetery, and more will become clear when we get there. I know I'm being a little bit vague, but there is a reason for this, and I will confirm more once we're there. Once we've done what we need to do, we'll then get back on the coach, and depending on the weather situation, we'll do one of two things. We'll either head straight down to Omaha Beach at that point, because keep in mind that this particular cemetery was chosen because of its location proximity to Omaha. Where the graves are located, you will see that there is a wall, and if we go to that wall, which we will do, and look down, that is Omaha. So this is actually the former vantage point that the Nazis had. This is where they were shooting at us from, and it was originally put as there's burials that took place here as early as D-Day +3. It's not the first American cemetery, we will point that out to you later, but that's why its location was chosen to be the main American cemetery. Remember, there's two in the area, but this is the main one that everyone thinks of, that everyone goes to. So we will drive down to Omaha Beach, have a little look around on the beach. There's a couple of different sectors that we want to stop you at as well, kind of similar to what, well, I say similar to what we did to Utah. You'll see that it's very different compared to Utah, and so we want to take you to a few different places and a few different memorials along the beach front. After that plan, because we've managed to get a few bits done yesterday, such as the German cemeteries freed up on time, what I was contemplating doing is taking you back to the town of Arromanches. If you remember, Arromanches was that town that we looked down upon. Remember, we did that photo stop on the edge of the British sector and we looked down on Arromanches. If we don't go there, there is no town slot today. It is just memorial sites. So I thought it would be quite nice to actually take you back to Arromanches so you have freedom to go and explore Arromanches. You can head down to the beach. That means you can then tick off a third beach by foot, which will be Gold Beach. There about a 15-minute walk, but that is to the cathedral. There are plenty of eating establishments between the hotel and the cathedral, and I'll show you the way into town. You can just have a night off. Does that sound okay with everybody? Yeah. Today's very much an outdoorsy day. There is no indoor stops. Everything is outdoors, so just every time we get off the coach, just make sure that you bring whatever you brought with you. In preparation for that, everyone's got comfy shoes on, which is good. And yeah, hopefully you'll be very moved by today. Do any of you have any immediate questions? No?
Yes, so remember yesterday Teddy Roosevelt, he's at the cemetery here. Ray Stevens too is in the cemetery. So just on tonight, because it is a free night and you guys will be wanting to get out and eat somewhere, I won't be talking for long, half an hour max tonight. So it's just a contextual kind of talk just to tie up the campaign, the end of the campaign, so that you kind of have an understanding of sort of what happens post the And last night I did walk into town. It is, as Lisa said, about a 15-minute walk, depending on how fast you can walk, 20 minutes, but of course another option is you can hop in an Uber and go down to the cathedral, and there are restaurants around there. I ate just down the road from it last night. Little bars, it's really quite a charming town, so it is nice. It was also spared bombardment, etc., and so it was one of the few towns that was relatively untouched. I think it became the administrative centre too for Bayeux
Yeah.
became the administrative centre for the Allies, because they had to, obviously sort stuff out, and you've got a mix of military and civilian population, so they needed they brought over a whole administrative wing, if you like, to actually run the show. Again, when we're driving down these roads, these give you a good indication of the hedgerow fighting, because this is what was happening. You'd be moving across these fields, and the enemy would be sitting behind one section of hedgerow or tree lines, etc., and you're fighting from field to field, trying to get through. Most of the advances are up the roads, so they're trying to, the roads are critical, so both sides need the roads to move their vehicles and weapons. But of course, when you close into contact with the enemy, you start to fan out, and that's where you start to have to move through fields and things like that to engage the enemy. Situations we're bigger, but in this case those dogs are not happy. Fair play.
throat's really bad today. The double espresso I just had should help. Right, so we are not that far away now from the cemetery. As we arrive up, you're going to see one of the other museums that we have in the area, which is the Overlord Museum, which, as you know, is the Operation Overlord, the code for the overall campaign of the Battle of Normandy. Good museum, a few tanks outside. Again, that's a boy question. Don't know what tanks they are. That's a boy thing, not a girl thing. But that takes us up to the entrance of the American cemetery. I told you yesterday this particular one is where they filmed the opening scenes. So the opening scene of the gentleman walking through the cemetery. This is that cemetery that is shown in the start of that movie. For those, some of you were asking about that as well. The Omaha Beach scene was actually filmed in Ireland. In case you were wondering, it's filmed on the east coast of the Republic of Ireland. So if you have a look over on the left-hand side, there is your Overlord Museum. This is where we end up being stuck for the ceremony. This is where we have to walk from because of security and heightened security and everything like that at the cemetery, but this is the driveway taking us up here. Now this cemetery, as I said, is the main American cemetery in the area. You have 9,387 American soldiers buried here. Amongst them are 4 women. And there are also 30 sets of brothers. Now there is nothing alphabetical about this cemetery. A lot of people come here and think it's all going to be the A's and the B's and the C's. It is not that case at all. Okay, everybody is random. The brothers they have tried to put together. So for example, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., he is buried next to Quinton Roosevelt, who died in the First World War. He's the only exception. No one outside of the Battle of Normandy is permitted to be buried in this cemetery unless your surname is Roosevelt. Then you can be buried wherever you want to be buried. Now the condition though on it was that the family had to pay. So it was actually Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s widow who requested that Quinton be moved here and buried next to his brother, and that was agreed as long as the family paid for it. Now the cemetery itself is held up and looked after by the ABMC, which is the American Battle Monuments Commission. This was established by the American administrative government back in 1923, so it's 101 years old now, and they look after 26 cemeteries around the world and 31 memorials, all dedicated to the Americans that have fought and lost their lives in numerous battles and war campaigns around the world. They have one of their large ones, for example, is in Manila in the Philippines. Now with this particular one then, well, with all the cemeteries, this land is gifted, I say gifted to the Americans. Every cemetery that we have in this area for Commonwealth, Allied soldiers, whatever the case may be, the French have offered the land on permanent loan. You don't, and that is free of any taxes, any VAT, anything. You do not pay for it as long as the organisation responsible for it maintains the cemetery, in this case the ABMC. So they're the ones that maintain, look after, protect, and so on and so forth. And the difference with this one and the German one, like I said, is the sheer attention to detail. Now, we've had the ceremony and we had the big service obviously a couple of months ago, and I'll talk to you about that, where that was. There is a giant memorial in there, and behind the memorial we have something called the Rose Garden. And this Rose Garden contains a horseshoe-shaped wall, which is the wall of the missing. So this contains the names of 1,447 soldiers who are missing in action. Now, when you see that wall, and you'll have free time to go and actually explore this properly, on the wall next to some of the names, these are in alphabetical order, but by different services. So you'll have some for the Navy, some for the Air Force, some for the Army. So if you want to go and have a look through, you can do, and that will be easier to look for names. Every now and then next to a name you'll see a rosette, and that rosette means that that soldier has since been found. And the idea is that one day that wall will be full of rosettes to say every single one of these soldiers has been found. The most recent burial that actually took place here though was only 2 years ago, and that was back in, I can't remember the exact date, but in 2022 a soldier's remains had been found. He had been previously missing in action. He was I think he was a fighter pilot. He was shot down and his body was never found. However, during an excavation of the crash site, they found his remains. They identified him, and at the request of the family, although no new burials are permitted to be in here, you can't pay your way into the cemetery. It's very similar to Arizona. You know, if you're part of that, you can be buried there, but no one else. This isn't an opportunity to just be put there because he was shot down over the Normandy campaign. His family requested he be buried here, so he's the most recent burial to take place, which is why, to be honest, getting the exact number of burials here is actually quite difficult. The websites say different things. The ABMC, as it stands, say 9,388. However, before this burial, it was 9,387. So my calculations of that plus 1 is 9,388. But it's around that number, give or take 1 or 2. You'll also see some of the graves will have the Star of David. We'll see they're all crosses apart from the Star of David that signifies the soldier was Jewish. Now, what we are going to do, as I said, I'm going to head across to the office, because I've got to do something, and then once I've been to the office I can be a bit more clear on what our plan is while we're here. At the same time, while that's happening, get your stuff together. We're going to be here for about an hour and a half, maybe a bit longer, depending on how long you would like. Follow me around, there will lead you around. I'm on the left hand side, just stick to the pathway, follow it all the way around, and you'll see the restroom block on the left. Okay, go there, do what you need to do, I will meet you there. Alright, please don't wait on the bus for me. Come over and I will wait for you at the toilet block. Alright, any questions? No? Okay. What we're going to do now then, as I said yesterday, we managed to fit in quite a lot yesterday, including the German cemetery, which originally I had planned for today. So what I'm going to do, or what I was going to do, is drive us back down to Arromanches. So Arromanches, remember, is where the Mulberry Harbour is located. Now we stopped on top of that hill and gave you that 5-minute photo stop to look down on the Mulberry Harbour and the town of Arromanches. But I think yesterday worked quite nicely, giving you that time in Sainte-Honorine-Des-Pertes to go and do your own thing for a little bit. So I think it's nice to do that again today. The nice thing with this place is that you are part of the sector of Gold Beach. So when you are there, you can, and the tide is falling. Remember, we were at high tide at 9:40 this morning, so low tide is going to be at 4:20 this afternoon, so it will get lower and lower. When we get there, as a result, there is a very strong possibility that part of the concrete harbour that's closest to the beach will be touchable. You can go down onto the sand, so you can collect sand from here if you wanted to add a bit of Gold Beach to your collection, but then you can actually go up and see part of this harbour up close and personal, so it's a bit special. So yeah, there are cafes and bars and restaurants and souvenir shops, but you also have Gold Beach, so you can do with your time. We won't spend as long as what we did at Sainte-Honorine-Des-Pertes, I don't think that's necessary. We'll probably do just over about an hour. But there is a very nice antique store here as well, which my friend owns, a guy called Pascal. He's got some very interesting things in this place. So yeah, we'll go there now. That will take about 30 minutes to get there. We'll have lunch. I've got all your lunch bags underneath the coach as well. Pad loaded them all up for us this morning, and then we'll give you your lunch bags. And then the same as yesterday, you can find a nice spot around. There's loads of nice seating along the seawall next to the beach. That if you wanted to sit down and just relax, we'll give you a bit of time to do so. After that, we will then make our way back to here, basically, to the bottom of the cliff and do Omaha. And we'll do a few stops along Omaha, and then afterwards we'll head to Pointe du Hoc to finish for the day. Anyone got any questions on that? There is one other story that I want to share with you before I hand you over to Dale, who's going to wrap up a few more things. And that's another soldier story. So obviously we told you a few soldier stories already. I think it just makes things a bit more personal and allows people a bit more of a connection to these things. And there's 2 stories, in fact, that I want to share. You going to do the neons?
No.
So the first story I want to share with you, and I'm just going to see if I have a photograph of them. So 1 second. First story is of these 4 chaps, so the number probably gives the game away on this one, but these brothers are called the Neeland brothers. So the Neeland brothers were 4 young brothers, all of right age to be enlisted into the forces, all came and fought on D-Day. 2 of them were killed, 1 of them was taken as a prisoner of war. Can you guess the reference here? So this is the inspiration for Saving Private Ryan. Alright, so as you know, in Saving Private Ryan, 4 brothers, 3 are killed, 1 Private Ryan is then rescued and sent back home so that his mother doesn't have to receive the news that all 4 sons died. Now the real story of the Nealon brothers is that 2 were killed, 1 was taken captive as a prisoner of war, was put in a concentration camp. At the end of the war, he was then went back home. So 2 sons died, 2 survived. However, when interviewed, the mother of these boys said that, you know, her son that was taken captive suffered such severe PTSD that he was never the same, understandably. So her words were she lost 3 sons to the war because 1 was never the same after the war. So that's why they went, or Spielberg went with the idea that 3 sons died. So the Nealon brothers are the real life inspiration for Saving Private Ryan. Now the other story is a bit of a heartwarming one, and it's one of my favourites. I told some of you last night at dinner, and that is the story of Billy Harris. So I don't know if any of you have heard his name before, but Billy Harris was a fighter pilot from Texas. He was shot down during in July '44. Plane went down, listed missing in action, body never found. Okay, and this is a photo of Billy along with his new bride, a lady called Peggy. They got married about 6 to 8 weeks before he was sent off to war. So it was one of those, you know, love of my life, let's get married now situations. So Peggy never remarried, alright, he was the love of her life, never remarried, and one regret she had is that she never knew where Billy was. Now, she didn't know of the ABMC, the American Battle Monuments Commission, and it was her nephew that said to her, have you tried looking for burial, so have you tried searching graves? And she didn't know that that was an option. So sure enough, they decided to search his details, and it was turned out that he was here at the American Cemetery, and she never knew. So this was in the early 2000s. At that point, she decided to get a flight over to France, went to Normandy, and for the first time in 6 years, she was reunited with Billy Harris. Now, she came and visited him. Like I said, she never remarried. This guy was everything to her. So she came over a couple of times a year, and if she wasn't here for celebrations such as anniversaries, birthdays, Christmases, Valentine's Day, she would send bouquets of flowers. So the staff became very familiar with her. Now, as she obviously got on a little bit in age herself, she suddenly couldn't keep flying from Texas all the way over here. You know, there's no direct flight between Texas and Normandy, so she couldn't do the journey as much anymore. So what her nephew and her family did for her was set up a website, and it was dedicated to Billy. So it was a story of Billy, what happened to him during the war, and also about Peggy. And it was the opportunity and encouragement that anyone visiting the Normandy Cemetery is to please take a photo of Billy for me. So people would go and take photos of his grave and then upload them to the website via the email address that she listed. And this turned Billy into a very popular grave to visit. So everyone would come and lay flowers, they would hear his story. So his grave was one of the most decorated graves. Now during COVID, I set up a Facebook group and a website called Europe in Wartime, just as a way to keep my passion and interest for the history alive. And I did a post about Billy Harris just to kind of share his story a little bit, and decided to look up where is Peggy now. And unfortunately, Peggy had died a week before I posted that. She died back, I think it was April 2020. But this photo now, there was a little plaque made, just a little cross, featuring that photo, and that's now at the base of Billy's grave. So now, and I think someone put another plaque with it to finally reunited and back together. So he's one of the more, I say, visited graves. So he's in Plot D along with the Roosevelt family. But yeah, I just wanted to share that little heartwarming story with you. If you are willing to humour me, actually, there's one other story I want to share. And you know, a lot of the times on these tours we get very caught up in statistics and strategies and things like that. But what I found most rewarding is the individual stories that don't make it into the history books, things that we don't read about, but they're actually the things that tug on your heartstring. Now, I told some of you yesterday that the ferry that we get over between Portsmouth and Caen, in June, I always get the second departure. There's 2 tours that run, one on the 31st of May, one on the 1st of June, and I always take the 1st of June one simply because it means that we get the ferry on the 4th of June, which is when any British veterans go over. So we always get on the boat with the veterans, which may be greedy of me, but I've worked it out, no one else has, so I take that spot. On one particular crossing, it was the 73rd anniversary, so it was about 7 years ago, and we get on, I've got a student group with me, and we get on and there's flags everywhere, and this was when I still wasn't sure if it was the set date, but of course it was coming up to the anniversary, and my group asked, well, you know, it is that time, it is June, so of course this is when the flags really do come out. And we go upstairs, remember the bar area that was on the ferry? We go up to that, it was on the same ferry that we were on, the Normandie, and there were 78 British veterans, all sat there with their pints of Guinness at, you know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They loved it. It was like having a room full of granddads. So, and the good thing with the vets at this point, you know, they were at a stage where they were ready to talk about it, which, as we know, wasn't always the case. Now they're ready to share the story, especially when the younger generation are asking, they're not used to that. So it was really nice and heartwarming to see. So the group started dividing up, and one thing that with the veterans that the Royal British Legion, which is the British equivalent of, say, the ABMC and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, is they always have a carer with these guys. You know, they're of a certain age that if family aren't with them, they will make sure that the carer is with them in order to look after them and make sure that they, you know, don't trip on things and, you know, that sort of stuff. And I went and joined one table that had 6 veterans, 6 carers, a couple of my students, a couple of the parents. So it was a nice big group around this small table. And the veterans started sharing their stories. It was a case of, what's the one thing that happened to you that wasn't what happened on Omaha or what happened on D-Day? And this one gentleman, his name was Harry, he was very, very quiet. He let everyone share their story. And one of the other carers turned around and said, well, Harry, what about you? What's your story? And he turned around and said, oh, I don't have a story. And his carer turned around and said, Harry, don't be silly. He was a paratrooper. And everyone straight away went, oh, that's cool. And he said, okay, well, yeah, my story when I was dropped, you know, a lot of people, you didn't have real any control over where you were dropped. You landed where you were aiming at. And he fell through the roof of the barn. So quite dramatic. He said it wasn't an adult landing whatsoever, but he crashed through the roof of this farmer's barn, and the farmer awoke, came and saw him, and he had a young daughter, and they said, you know, they heard you, there's a few Germans out there. So he said he set up a little sniper nest at the window of this barn, and the farmer became his spotter. He was like, right, I can see one over there, and together they just started picking off these Germans. And the young girl, she was there like trying to hold ammo for him, and they kind of like became a little three little group. Now eventually the farm got not surrounded, but there was quite a few coming, and Harry decided, I'm going to surrender at this point, I'm not risking you and your daughter, put the gun down, walked out, became a POW. Right? That was his story. And he said, so there's not much to it, you know, there was no, I crashed in a barn. And one of the other carers came around and said, oh, you heard about me? And he turned around and said, how have you heard about me? She said, Harry, isn't it? She said, yeah. And she got up and she said, I've got someone that wants to meet you. And it turned out on the ferry was the daughter. The daughter had moved at the end of the war. So she grew up. She ended up meeting an Englishman. She moved to England, lived in England, had a family, and every anniversary she would go back. And it turned out he had never missed an anniversary since he started doing them in the 60s. He went back, and so did she. They were on that ferry every year together for over 45 years and never knew it until this day when finally they figured it out. So the carer went and found this daughter, who obviously now was an older lady herself. She was there with her daughter and her grandbaby. So they had just had this new grandchild, so the grandchild was going over. So they got reunited, and he was chatting away to them, hugged the daughter, and at the end of their little chat, which we weren't, this was private, we stood back and let them have their moment. He took a beret off and he popped it on the baby's head at the end of it, and they said their goodbyes. But that's just one of my favourite stories. That you won't read in a history book, but there are millions of those versions of stories. But I just wanted to share that one with you. We're talking about our nice, warm, fuzzy feeling moments. I wanted to just briefly share that. Right, I'm going to hand you back to Dale, and then we'll let you know when we get a little bit closer down to Arromanches.
Thank you, Lisa. Mine's not a warm and fuzzy story. I just wanted to revisit a couple of things. Just to, now, yesterday when we were at Utah, some of you may have noticed, if not all of you may have noticed, there was some land off the shore which had some structures on it, a few miles. Sort of, yeah, you saw all that. So there are actually two islands over there, two small islands, and they're called the islands of Sainte-Marcof. And so on D-Day morning at 4:30 in the morning, 4 American soldiers in 2-man canoes, armed only with a knife each, paddle over to the islands and swim onto the islands to check out if there are any Germans on the island. And it's unoccupied, so they report back, and then as a result of that, 132 troops of the 4th and 24th squadrons of the 4th US Cavalry go across to occupy the islands. But the Germans have mined the place, so there are mines there, and so what happens is they go on there, and actually 2 of those soldiers are killed and another 17 are wounded as part of that operation to occupy an unoccupied island. So that was just a little thing that happened just off the shores of Normandy there on D-Day morning. The other thing that occurred, now we're coming up to Arromanches, right? And as Lisa said, it's Gold Beach. It's the westernmost beach of the British and Canadian landing type places, and it's where one of the Mulberry Harbours is set up. Going to be 2 Mulberry Harbours. We spoke about them in previous days as well. A is the one at Omaha, and B is the one at Arromanches. And these, some of you may have seen pictures of them in your readings and documentaries or whatever. That we did show you one picture the other day of these. But they're an engineering feat. They're a marvel, and there's about 5 sections to these harbours, which have all got to be towed across the channel with tugboats, right? And so they had the Phoenix caissons, and this is the main part of it. And they were a large hollow concrete structure. As I said, it's almost 5 stories tall, and they were floated across, so they were aerated, right, so that they could float. And then when they got them into position, they had plugs or valves. They released the plugs or valves. When they got them into position, the water came up into them, weighted them down, and they sunk down into position. They had spud piers, and these were floating piers that they attached to it, and they would rise and fall with the tide. Right? So they were a flexible structure that would also help with the offloading operation. So you've got your main structure that's fixed, but then you've got these floating piers that obviously can work with the tide going in and out. You had the whale roadways, and you saw examples of those when we were at Utah. As we drove out, there was an example of those, and these were attached and run off the main pier all the way to the shore. And so the trucks would come in, the ships would come in, unload the vehicles, and they would go onto these roadways, and they just drove the vehicles off. Trucks, tanks, everything just drove off these piers. And then they had bombardons, they were called, bombardons, and that was a breakwater. So you set up your pier, and then they had these, and they set them up further out so that as a breakwater to stop those ocean, the waves and everything coming in and doing too much damage. Of course, there are, as we mentioned, a few weeks later in June, a massive storm destroys the one at Omaha and badly damages the one at Arromanches. There are still 50 of that one at Arromanches. Just thousands of tons of equipment is coming through here. But they don't start building or get built until 3 days after the landing. So what they do prior to their arrival is that each beach has what they call a gooseberry harbour. this is another little temporary harbour, which they had pre-built. I can't tell you, I'll try to find out the length of them later on and come back to you on it, but they were pre-built, so they had a length that ran to the road, had a length which was basically the roadway, and then they had a T-bone ending, basically a pier, and they used barges, whatever, just to sail them in, sail them straight in as a fixed piece, and then they dropped them at each one of those beaches, and they were used until the other two larger harbours became so I'll stop there and let you either nap or reflect on what's upcoming and what's gone before, and we'll come back to you once we get a bit closer, which will be about 15 minutes, I believe.
there. Where the coach parks is next to the little post office, and then we just have to walk down the hill down to the beach, which is about a 5-6 minute walk. Alright, so we'll walk down there. Once we get there, I'll show you the main, I'll say kind of stretch there, high street, you can call it that, which has got quite a few cafes, little restaurants, little boutique stores, little bakeries, the antique store if you're interested, and then we'll head down that road towards the main town square, which is where they have a new museum built. So they used to have a little, Arromanches wasn't very visited. As I said, this area has grown a lot in popularity, so things like Longues-Sur-Mer battery, that visitor centre just popped up out of nowhere, and the same with Arromanches. There was a very small, quaint little museum here, and then they decided to tear it down and make a new one, and the size difference was staggering. Put it this way, the old museum became the car park for the new museum. Alright, so that's now, and a lot of the locals actually don't like it. I mean, I don't know what you thought about Arromanches when you saw it the other day, but Arromanches is my dream retirement home. It is, I just think it's so beautiful. Obviously we're going to head back and drive back down to it now. I just think it's so pretty, and what they've done is put this new museum. We've got a few old cars coming up behind us as well. They might come down. It's so this new museum is a big glass building, and it just doesn't fit anymore. And so the locals aren't really too fond of it. This is a very sleepy town as well. Very sleepy town. In the winter, nothing's really open. It's very, it's nothing's really here and open and operating in the winter. It's all about the summer. So as we head down the hill through the front windscreen, you can start to see those concrete blocks out in the water again. Obviously the tide is falling, so there'll be a bit more visual this time, which is nice. And then, yeah, as I said, we'll get parked up. Once we do, we'll grab the lunches as well. So the lunches are underneath the coach, same as yesterday. One thing, when we hand you your bags, please just inspect the bag, as there should be one that is a dietary requirement, and yesterday there wasn't one. They've assured me that there is one, but how they've marked it is anyone's guess, and without physically opening 25 different sandwiches, I don't know. So I'm hoping that they've actually marked the bag again. So just inspect the bag. If there's any mark or any tick or anything written on it, please just let me know, and then that way I know that it's a special one to meet a dietary requirement. So we'll grab those bags and then we'll head down to the coast, head down to the beach, which is just down the hill coming up, and then we'll have about an hour for you to just spend a bit of time exploring at your own pace. Is that alright with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
The flat soldier sculptures up on the hill. They were talking about those sculptures and
No, that's been taken away. They got taken down and put in storage back in.
So one of those.
I don't see
Right,
that would be the 360 museum. Remember where the photo stop was? That's up there. Okay, so we're going to park here once Pav's manoeuvred. I won't be able to back my bicycle up like this coach. And we're going to walk just down the hill on the left. It's not a steep hill by any means, but we'll walk down together and we'll make a rendezvous point down there together and walk back up together, okay? There are public restrooms down here as well, which I'll point out to you. But if you do go into a cafe or a restaurant, obviously keep in mind you can use theirs. So take what you need. Anything you don't can stay on the coach. And once you're ready, we'll head down for a bit of a lunch break.
Is there water in the lunch?